It's time to get started, everyone. We are live in the Nutmeg Tavern. We've got the nutmeg. We've got the tavern. I don't know, we played around with the lighting. Didn't light maybe so many candles. So, you know, you tell me whether you can see me in the dimness of the cozy tavern. Got the fire going and all that good stuff. So we've got an interesting kind of topic today. So I just kind of set the topic as Q&A ahead of time, but we have a bunch of apothecary items that we added into the catalog and are on the website now. So we've got some kind of 18th century soap apothecary topic. We got a few slides and we can talk about some of that kind of stuff too. So lots of fun stuff, and there's all these very scented things in the tavern today. What do we? Is this like mint over here?
Yes, that one's mint.
Mint and something, and
we've got some sage,
flowers,
we've
and
got
there's all kinds
parsley,
of
I think,
stuff scattered all over in the tavern. So don't trip over any of this strangeness as you go get a drink. I am your host, John Townsend. We're going to be talking about fun 18th century stuff. I am joined by Lauren, who is in the chat.
Hi.
And Ivy, who is on the console.
Hey, everybody.
And we did have some guests earlier this week.
Did.
Where were they from?
Vermont.
Oh, well, yeah.
Adam and Liz, and they came, and we had a great time talking.
Yeah.
It was very fun.
They came while I was shooting, so they didn't get to say hi to me.
Well,
but
I told them stories.
yeah, exactly. So they got to hear stories, and they came up to the Nutmeg Tavern, didn't they?
Mm-hmm, absolutely.
There we go. The apothecary items are on the website. I think Lauren put something in the chat, and it's kind of fun. You know, in some ways you think, and in a lot of ways these are Nutmeg Traders branded products. And sometimes you look at that and you think, boy, that doesn't seem very 18th century. But the reality is, once you really start digging into some of the newspaper advertisements and the different things you'll find in recipe books and whatnot, they had a lot of beauty and different scented, soaps, and if somebody was just like, bath salts aren't 18th century, until you actually go and you look at the newspaper advertisements and you find something almost exactly like that, right?
But so far, I haven't found any nutmeg scented soap in the 18th century.
Okay,
we'll keep our eye out for it.
No. Well, we have nutmeg scented soap.
That's true. We do.
It looks good.
No, don't eat it.
It looks like chocolate. Like I want to eat it. Anyway, nutmeg soap and all kinds of fun stuff. What is this one? It looks like raspberry soap or something. I don't know.
That one's lavender.
Lavender soap and I don't know, poppy seed soap.
I was going to start a poll about the lighting, whether the lighting was good or not. And YouTube added another poll option.
Oh.
You can do 3 things at a time now.
3 things.
Phew.
So now you can say, is it too dark? Is it too light? Or is it just right?
It's perfect. I am so glad to hear that.
Why they only had 2 choices as a poll was odd. We did mention, it was last week was a marathon, right? Giant, long season 17 marathon. If you need one of those, if you're the kind of person who's like, I need to listen to John talking about food while I go to sleep, which I don't know, maybe it would make you hungry in your sleep, but a lot of people enjoy that. Probably the perfect kind of video to watch. Put it on, 10 seconds later, you're asleep, just like that. But the one before that, we talked about catalogs, and if you're interested in one of our print catalogs, which has, all kinds of crazy stuff in it, glasses and hats and all kinds of fun stuff, you can check out the website for that. Apothecary things. So do we look at the slides first, or should I read
Why don't you read something and then we'll do some slides?
Okay. So I think, let me find this New York one. This was the one. This is a collection of newspaper advertisements. This is New York. I mean, this book is New York 1800 to 1804. This is just 4 years of, and these are specifically arts and crafts newspaper advertisements. So they were doing a lot of advertising in the time period. Beauty salon. Interesting. That was part of the ad. John J. Hassey acquaints the ladies and gentlemen of the city of New York and its vicinity that its well-known and long-established dressing room, number 72 Wall Street, is constantly open for the accommodation of the public. It is a fact to which all his customers can attest that his dressing room has produced the most fashionable crops and the completest full-dressed pate that is ever seen in the city. And I think he's talking about hair, of course, cropped hair. And he also has the satisfaction to inform them that he is not dependent on Europe for his variety of fashion, but assures them that they are of true American origin, independent of accommodating the public with the most fashionable cuts and dress. He has it in his power to furnish them with the following articles: American, French, and Italian hair powders, hard and soft pomatum of every description. That's like hair grease or something. Razors in boxes, or by the single one, shaving boxes with highly scented soap, combs, comb brushes, together with the greatest variety of essences, and in fact, every article necessary for the toilet either of a lady or gentleman. Ladies' wigs, frisettes, curled hair of the newest American fashions, supplied on the shortest notice, also with the gentlemen's full-dressed and curled wigs and scalps, equal to the Winslow Manufactory. And this is 1801. So he's still selling wigs all the way into 1801, but there's a lot of different things for dressing hair, hair powders, all these super fancy things. And that's Mr. Henry Hassey. I mean, there's a hairdresser over, multiple hairdressers over on the other page here. The one below it where he's hairdresser important instead of hairdresser interesting. That's my kind of newspaper advertisement. And we've got, in that same kind of connection, we don't have any hair products, do we?
No.
No, we don't have any hair product. We have different scented soaps. We have, what's this? Some kind of, natural deodorant. I'm not sure if any of these, did you run into anything that seemed to be deodorant?
Not necessarily. Sometimes you'd wonder whether that wasn't the purpose of some of the things, but he didn't state it directly on any.
I don't think they had the same kind of terminology.
Yeah.
Well,
and that's always one of the things where you're like, okay, even if it's just talking about a plant, and you're like, okay, do they call the plant back then by the same name I would call the plant today?
Yeah, exactly. And also, if you do have questions, go ahead and drop them in the chat. They don't have to be about this topic. There was a wedding question earlier, different questions like that. We are taking those questions. We'll kind of grab onto them later on. And here we got some of the soaps. A lot of the soaps in the time period, they did have soft soaps and hard soaps, and they kind of put together in different ways. Sometimes they were called wash balls, and it could be wrong, but I think sometimes some of those are for washing like garments and not necessarily your body, but they didn't really have a different kind of soap. Right, so all our soaps are basically the same. We have different kinds of soaps now. We wouldn't use, like clothing soap on our bodies, but they didn't have that kind of differentiation necessarily. Wash balls. Here's a recipe for white soap. This soap is made of 1 part the lees of Spanish potash and quicklime to 2 parts of oil of olives or oil of almonds. So very, very simple soap with the lye of Spanish lye, basically, and lime, and then olive oil. And then, what is this one? Honey soap? Is that what it says? Yes. Take 4 ounces of white soap and as much honey, half an ounce of the salt of tartar, 2 or 3 drams of distilled water of fumitory. I don't know what that is. Mix it all together. It cleanses the skin well and it renders it delicately white and smooth. And then there was a perfumed soap underneath it, which has 4 ounces of marshmallow roots, and then starch and flour and pine nut kernels, which I don't know if I've seen pine nut kernels show up in any English cookery, but here it is showing up in a soap, and some other standard things that make up the soaps, oils, and I'm not sure where the lye is at here, but very interesting recipes for that. Here's a different wash ball, white soap, slicing it thin. Do we know what orris is?
No, I don't.
Yes, Florentine orris.
I did think you're like, if I had looked up every single term of the thing, you're like,
take
that I would have been doing a lot today. But I looked up a couple.
But it also has elderflowers, cloves, rose leaves, coriander seeds, lavender, bay leaves. So they aren't just a super simple thing. Some of them are really complex. And interestingly enough, a lot of these things we have here are complex in their composite. So they got a lot of different kinds of oils and things in them. Like I think the wound care. What is that? Do you have the listing for the wound care?
Of what's in
it? The ingredients. I don't know if I can.
Okay. We've got. I wouldn't try. It's very, very small print. We've got yarrow, plantain, St. John's wort, comfrey, chamomile, calendula, and lavender, and they're in a beeswax shea butter.
Right. So
oil base.
And a lot of these are, constructed in almost exactly that same kind of way. It's like, oh, it's going to have this and this and this and this all together. And some of these are, you wonder whether or not they're specifically just for the scent or whether they thought they had specific healing powers. And some of these recipes that we have, say in The Complete Housewife, they're in the medicine section, but are doing some of the same kinds of things. So here's a salve for burn or scald. And this one's very simple. They're using, for the oil of the salve, they're using butter. And then for the sort of healing power of it, it's got the green inner rind of elder. And I'm not sure if it's an elder tree or an elder flower. And then you put those together. But really, that's the only 2 components of that particular one. So it's very interesting how some of them are, complex, but they really aren't stretching that far out. They aren't as, a lot of, I would have, just first blush thought, oh, they really didn't have anything terribly complicated. But in fact, when we really dig into it, we find incredibly complicated kind of recipes for that. Let's jump into, can you punch up the images for me? So here's one of these are all from newspapers, right? From early America?
Well, some of them are, if it's a newspaper one, yes, it's from early America.
Okay. Here's a perfumery, lavender water, and then we have honey waters, hungry water. Now, do we know exactly what's going on with the waters? I think we do have some recipes for some of these waters. Are they like external?
They're water-based, because I think most of the stuff we have here is oil-based with the herbs infused into the oil, but they're water-based. So, rose water, lavender water, and of course becoming much more complex.
But they're probably just for external use.
Yes. A lot of them were for beauty, and then some of them did seem to be slightly medicinal.
Essence of peppermint. So some of this is just like an oil. And And then we have salt of lemon for removing iron molds. And I think what they're actually talking about is stains. When you use irons on things and you end up staining it, and the salt of lemon helps take those stains out. But we have lip salve, tooth powders. We have these syrups, which probably for flavoring. We have almond paste, pearl powder, and I'm not sure what that, it's hard to read that one, and then more tooth powders and a smelling bottle. So there are all sorts of, combinations of things here for in this particular perfumery. We have just a quick sort of image. This is a Dutch image of a barber shop, but it's kind of half barber shop, half surgery, half apothecary. We see some medicinal things sort of around there, and there is this sort of mix of, oh, I'll cut your hair and I'll, sort of half beauty, half medicine thing going on here. Here's a little ointment pot or a salve pot from that time period. And there were lots of these. And they end up being something that you would buy them with their ointment in them, and then you would use that all up, and then you would probably use the pot for something else. Or you might even take it back to the shop and have them refill it. So put more in my little, sometimes they're called galley pots because of the style of pottery they were. Many of these exist today because they kind of show up in archaeological digs, and they have lots of fun designs, and sometimes they're very small and other times they do get a good bit larger. And we have had some of those in the past. Sometimes I've made some in the past. They're a fun little artifact to make. These are made, one of them, the one with the holes in the top here, is made for holding a sponge, and then just the round ball is a way to hold your wash balls in your, when you're in the area where you're going to be using them. So keep it from, messing up the tabletop or whatever. You would have these very, very fancy, very expensive ways to hold your toiletries. Here's another perfumery. Hair powders, pomatums. We've got the lavender waters. We've got it's like spirits of hartshorn is probably like a smelling salt. Scented wash balls with cases, which we just saw a case for that. Shaving boxes. Shaving powder, pearl tooth powder. I'm sure those were great for your teeth. A vermilion lip salve. So is that really lipstick?
Yeah, the tinted stuff. You're like,
Corn plasters in a box. And then they also have groceries and tobacco and long and short pipes. So lots of fun stuff there. He's selling more medicinal things, but it's also some of these standard toiletry things going on at the same time. So you can get your bilious pills or essence of peppermint, which you might use for several different things, and elixirs, snuff and tooth powders and tinctures and elixirs, salves and ointments. And probably even your country physician might get supplied with large and small quantities. Who knows? Maybe they will even do a special branding for you. And I like this: medicine boxes for onboard ship for seamen. So if you want to have, you're going off on a trip, maybe you want your own little package of medicines, and people loved those kind of patent medicines and things like that at the time period. So. And a period shaving bowl, which was done in a tin glazed piece here, so fairly inexpensive, but you could have all kinds of designs, and those were made for shaving or bleeding. So you might, if you're going to be bled, that was what that little hollowed out section was for. Now, some of these might have been just for decoration or for use. So there we go. And we're back. We're back. How about questions? Any questions for me, Lauren?
Okay. All right. So somebody was curious about the 18th century weddings. What were they like? Did people bring their own food like a potluck? Could they afford rings? And then someone else followed up with, did they have special clothing for weddings?
It's not an easy answer to give you as a monolithic, this is what's happening in the 18th century. There are a lot of different cultural things going on, even within the cultures of Great Britain and those ones that move over to North America at the time. So they have some very, very different traditions, whether you're in East Anglia or the southern part of England or the northern area of England. So there's a lot of different traditions, and they kind of, if you want the best kind of information on that, you want to see how those differ, check out the book called Albion's Seed, which talks about those different cultures as they go from parts of Great Britain and then are transplanted into North America, and they come in different kind of times and waves to different areas, and they each have their own specific kind of cultural takes on those things. And he breaks it down and talks specifically about things like weddings, so you can see the differences of those. And I don't have them off the top of my head, but that's where I go when I want to dig into that and at least get my first blush. Okay, here's what's going on. Here's how these traditions vary a lot. So things like wedding food. In the 18th century, you're not going to have the big wedding thing going on generally like we would have it. It's going to be much more, small kind of family thing, but people would come and visit those people that were married. And they, in some of those cultures, they would have a special kind of like seed cake, a lot more like a what am I thinking? The Christmas, like a fruit cake,
like the 12th night cake.
Yeah, like a 12th night cake.
Very rich, delicious.
Right, but solid, and
yet not fluffy.
You would like take away a piece of that with you. There's a lot of different ones, but the idea of wedding dresses certainly aren't not the same as they are today, and the cultural differences are just. I mean, it's really hard to put together a solid. This is what it was like in the time period because it's so different for different people.
But we do know that it
was nothing like today.
It was not like ours.
Basically, I'll tell you, it's nothing like it was today.
So this person was wondering if you knew what the blue pill and the black draught that were often prescribed by Dr.
Black
Maturin.
draft?
Yes, draft. I'm sorry. By Stephen Maturin.
Yeah.
Mastering Community.
So the blue pill is going to have things in it probably. So sometimes he's talking strictly of placebos. So they are basically just powdered chalk, maybe with a little sugar or something in them. And he talks about slime drafts and all kinds of like, ugh, this sounds really bad. And a lot of times he's just sort of making it up as he goes.
They're giving him something really icky.
No,
They'll think it makes him feel better.
I'm going to give him the blue pill this time. Okay, it didn't work for him. He'll take the red one. It's just red instead of being blue. Sometimes though, the blue ones specifically have some kinds of mercury in them. So they're going to be doing, and there's lots of different kinds of mercury, and some of them are really bad, and some of them aren't as terrible for you. But I could not describe them beyond that. I don't know which ones he's specifically referring to. We might be able to go into Quincy's depository but that would take a while. I'd have to go looking in the and see what it happens. But there are books from the time period. There's an original one over here that we can dig in and see what a particular one might have in it. Some of the things we wouldn't even recognize as a medicinal component today.
Okay. So someone's writing a book set in the 17th and 18th century, and they were wondering if you had any tips about it.
It depends on, I mean, tips for what? I think one of the things that makes one of the things that makes the Aubrey and Maturin series, which is one that I pay a lot of attention to, read and listen to all the time, is that he's spent a great deal of time in the gentleman's magazines of the time period. So, he's dealing with mostly people that are captains and the doctors and sometimes he's just working with, standard lower class sort of sailors at the same time. But he's just reading lots and lots of those gentlemen's magazines from the time period so that he's just infused with the kinds of things that they would be reading and talking about, so that when you want to have your characters in your book interact or understand what the kinds of things that they would want to know about, the kinds of things they did know about, that's what gives you that. So you want to basically read the kinds of things they were reading. It's hard to do that because sometimes they were reading very, very, in-depth and difficult to understand things today. I mean, we don't read a lot of Virgil or, whatever, but many of those people were classically educated and it'd be hard for us to catch up with some of them.
Yeah, hard to replicate the feel.
Yeah.
I was thinking it would probably be really nice to have some helpful, friendly beta readers, who would be willing to read it, who are, maybe reenactors, who've really soaked up the ambiance of the time period, and who would be able to tell you when something kind of threw them out of the story, so you could rework it a little bit and that kind of thing.
Yeah, and I think part of it also is taking a lot of time reading or looking at the art of the time period, just to kind of get that sense of, the art can lead you astray, because art is even in the time period is meant to give you, is trying to communicate something, and there are hidden messages, hidden symbolism in a lot of those, so that unless you know what, it's like, well, why is this showing up all the time? Well, it doesn't necessarily show up in real life. It's meant to mean something. So you're going to kind of go into some of those with some understanding, but I think a lot of that can give you a real sense of what the world was like.
Yes, I really enjoy the art quite a bit because it helps give you the lived-in feel. It kind of pulls all the pieces together. Right. Somebody was asking about St. Augustine, and I was going to put in links to a couple of the videos that we had done there. In case they hadn't seen that. So this person was wondering, how did one purchase a straight razor for shaving? The local blacksmith probably could not make such a thing.
Right, so straight razors are, there are a couple of, they're changing the design as we go in this time period. They start off very simple. Some of them are forged, some of them are cast, and then made to have a shaving edge. But just like we saw in the advertisements earlier, the people that are selling these supplies are selling the equipment at the same time, and you're going to get a razor from somebody because that's a very high-end item. You're probably going to get it from somebody who specializes that, and cutlers are making them. They have the special knowledge to create a shaving razor that's going to stay hard enough, that's going to get sharp enough. There is a book that's a French cutlery book from the a cutler's book from the 18th century, and it even shows a straight razor with a special clamshell cover over the top of it that makes it into a kind of a straight razor, or a kind of a safety razor, which is very interesting. So
that sounds like a great plan.
They were really, trying to work on. It's like, how do we make this easier, safer, whatever.
One of the trade cards that I saw today while I was browsing through stuff was specifically for, it was a perfumers, and there are also razor makers.
There you go. They perfect combination.
Apparently had an interesting combo there. So this question was, how common was it for the 18th century folks to travel for leisure to other colonies or otherwise? For most people, was survival such a challenge that people spent most of their time just in one place?
Travel journals of the time period are one of the most kind of interesting, important readings when you want to know what a place is like. Because somebody's traveling to someplace, they're seeing that from a different set of eyes. So they necessarily describe it in a different way than somebody who lives there all the time. We have travelers in this time period for traveling for different reasons. You might travel because you're doing that for commerce reasons. You're a salesman, or you want to sell goods or whatnot. Or some people are traveling for entertainment, or a lot of people are traveling for health. So it's like, oh, I'm ill, and they would say you should be traveling for your health. So that happens to Nicholas Creswell. He's ill. He's been given bad medicine that almost kills him, and so it's like, oh, you need to go to sea. And going to sea in the time period is one of those, you should traveling for your health kind of thing. Sometimes they thought the particular environment, you need dry air, you need to be in a moister environment or whatever. People would travel for their health. So there's a lot of traveling going on. Some people are just doing it because, So the Dr. Alexander Hamilton from the middle of early 18th century, not the Alexander Hamilton you're probably thinking of, he's traveling kind of partially for his health and partially because, I'm tired of, I just want to go and have fun. Of course, he makes fun of people and whatever.
But most of the journals and writing are from an upper class.
Yes.
Or maybe like for learned and scientific purposes. That's
very much
the bulk of it.
Yeah, most people are staying at home and working. Just the regular working class people are not going to be doing any real quantity of travel, and they may never get more than 5 miles from home.
Okay, so this person was wondering, why did they powder their wigs?
Strictly a fashion thing, as far as I know. Possibly also like it keeps it cleaner in a sense. Sort of like the dry shampoo kind of a thing. I don't have an answer. I don't have a better answer than that. I wish I had a better answer than that.
As far as we know, it's just to make it look better.
Yeah.
But there may be more to it that we just haven't run across. So this person was wondering, for warm weather in the deep south, what clothing would you recommend for a 1760s scout? I think linen is the way to go. I think
linen's
that's
the
what
way to go. I mean, you got to think about the scout in this specifically a scout situation, and part of the clothing that you're wearing is protective, because you're not just walking in a mown grass yard. So you're going to have protective clothing, and so some of that's about heat and what's comfortable, and part of it's also what's going to protect me in the environment. Why am I going to be wearing a particular kind of clothing? And sometimes that clothing is matching what the kind of clothing that the people you're going to be around. Maybe you're wanting to specifically wear pseudo military, even if it's something like a hunting frock that identifies you in a certain way, or just the opposite of that. So I'm going to be interacting with Native Americans, and I don't want them to be hostile to me. I'm going to be wearing something that is Native American style, so that they don't see me as a threat. So there's a lot of different things to think about as you're chewing on that particular concept. Actually, Sunday's video that's coming up is talking about the frontier and surviving in the frontier, and the dangers and the kinds of equipment, and I talk about clothing in that.
Very good. How did the Industrial Revolution, beginning in the late 18th century, affect the daily lives of the colonists?
Well, even in the colonies, that industrialization is starting to happen, and it's going to change the environment from more rural and agricultural to more city and industrial, and that's especially what's happening along that East Coast, where all the agriculture is moving west because of nice fresh ground and a more appropriate environment for that. With it's like Indiana, we have places to grow corn, but it just doesn't grow that well if you're right along the coast. So that industrialization is happening in that late 18th century context, and it's obviously changes that environment completely.
Yeah, a little bit at a time, and everything's different.
Exactly.
How would they take care of wounds, and did they have any types of ointments? This was earlier on, so you may touch
wounds
on
and ointments. Yeah. So they're a lot more dangerous in that time period. Things getting infected and trying to keep them clean. They may or may not, depending on the person, understand what they really need to do about that. I think they paid a lot more attention to it than we do today, though, because today, it's like, well, put a Band-Aid on it, keep it clean, put an ointment on it. But if it goes bad, we know what to do. It's like, well, we go see a doctor, and he'll have the right kind of medicine, and we'll be all right. And they didn't have that third choice, right? So if you're not paying attention, they would have a lot of different kinds of home remedies for taking care of those wounds, to hope that they would not get infected. But that certainly happens, and we see a lot of different recipes for those kinds of things. They would necessarily have particular kinds of, wives' tale. What do I want to call it? Home remedies, like, oh, you cut yourself. Well, let it bleed a lot, on purpose. But that's all. It all varies within families and whatnot.
Yeah, and it did vary from type of wound to type of wound.
Right.
There was a particular one I was looking at today that I had marked earlier, and it was because it was for burns specifically. And, it had specific herbs that were meant for that treatment, and they weren't in the other ones that were meant for bruising or something else.
Right.
So they had it honed down to different things. Okay, so there's a couple different super chats. So there's one from Eric F. and it's, could you describe what an entry-level civilian outfit might look like for someone who wants to try dressing in period clothing at events?
Standard civilian clothing, if we're talking about Revolutionary War time period, so 1770, 1780. I mean, you didn't give a particular time frame there. It does vary, but a simple pair of knee breeches, stockings, and shoes, and then a shirt, a waistcoat, and some kind of simple coat, along with a hat. It really is a fairly complex and multi-component outfit, at least for men. in this time period. And almost every illustration you see, people are wearing that complete outfit if they are in a public kind of setting. Now, if you're in a work setting, then sometimes some of those things aren't there. But even then, that's only if they're actually doing the work. So somebody actually doing the work might just have his shirt on, might just have a shirt and a waistcoat on. But if they're it's like, I'm going to be walking in town where other people are at, well, I'm definitely going to have a hat on. I'm definitely going to have a coat of some sort, or else you're basically kind of undressed. It's hard for us to get our heads around, because everybody wears very, very casual clothing. But that's not what's happening in the time period.
Yeah, and I put into the chat both the Living History Personas page in its entirety, and also specifically the one for the 1770 civilian, because on those pages we kind of walk through like what they would have had, and then what options, like kind of breaking down what options we have to kind of give a sense of the variety that they might have had in a single type of outfit. Because they really had quite the variety.
Right, and that's why sometimes it's really easier to hone in on something that's working, like a working sailor's outfit is much simpler, or a working farmer's outfit, much simpler. But again, that's for them when they're working.
Okay, there's a super chat from Max Cool. Happy Friday to all in the tavern. And then there's a super chat from Easy D. Any tips for visiting Philadelphia's Old City?
Ooh, boy, I've only been there a couple times, so I don't have any particular tips. But maybe there are folks that are closer to that. But it's kind of that whole inner city there. That historic district is kind of, I just wander around and have fun. There are a lot of different things to look at, and Independence Hall and all those kinds of good things. And the great museum of the American Revolution there, that's fairly new, and that is a great thing to visit.
Do you want to do our Proverbs, since we talked about Philadelphia?
Proverbs. So we've been looking at some of these great Proverbs.
Oh, that reminds me. We could try is this one familiar?
Oh, yes.
But we'll have to find one that's specific to that, because I didn't.
Well, this one's, is this one familiar, right? I had never heard of this one before. Laws are like cobwebs. Catch small flies, and the great ones break through before your eyes. Whew. And this one is, I've heard of ones that are similar to this one, but I hadn't heard of this one before. By diligence and patience, the mouse bit into the cable. And a cable in a time period, can you imagine a rope that's like this big around, or maybe even bigger, a ship's cable? Giant rope. So, by diligence and patience, the mouse bit into the cable. And let's see. If man could have his wishes, he would double his troubles. I'm not sure how that one's written and what it really means.
Well, I assumed that if you could get what you wished for, you would cause yourself a lot of trouble.
Yeah, but he spelled half, H-A-L-F, not have, H-A-V-E.
Oh, that's
so
interesting.
If you could cut your wishes in half, and you only have half as many wishes, you would double his troubles. And that seems to be the opposite of, that's like the proverb. There's the one that's sort of like, more sadness has come through, prayers answered than unanswered. But I don't know. I'm not sure exactly where
you do wonder, because some of the proverbs are like winnowing a more like a broader concept, and you're like, I haven't heard the proverb, and that also means that I probably haven't heard the broader concept as well.
Yeah.
Now, so looking there, is there one that's like super, super familiar to you? Because
super familiar. Let's see. No, maybe they're. These are all fairly strange, and at least to me.
That's okay. I'll pick one out for next time that suits my criteria perfectly.
Some of them are very interesting. Yeah.
Okay.
Wow. Whew. Those are some good ones.
They are. Okay, so question. Got that one. Okay, all done. Okay, can you speak to the role that domestic geese and turkeys brought back over from Europe's, what their roles were in the 18th century?
So, turkeys? What was the other thing?
Geese and turkeys.
Geese and turkeys and the roles which they would play. So the turkeys in America were not a imported species. So that's not something that comes in from Europe. And I'm not sure about imported geese either. I don't have a good answer for that one.
They would have used them feathers.
Yeah,
I mean, other than
yeah.
as meat, because they would have used them as meat birds.
Right.
But they would have used the goose.
Oh yeah,
too.
sure. What was that one? Did we have one recipe that had something like feathers in it? What was that about?
I think there was, but I'm not recalling what it was. Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, so one of the things we were looking at was the ingredients, and this is every man his own physician. And a lot of these things here from the Apothecary here have a lot of different sorts of medicinal herb kind of things in them. And the same thing is happening in a book like the Every Man His Own Physician. There's, so for the want of appetite, so an appetite exciter, chamomile tea. And then we have a something for nervous colic that has Epsom salts in it. And here's a mint water. And let's see, what is it for? I'm not sure what the mint water is for. This seems to be for vomiting or putrid or spotted fever. I don't think you want that. This is something for a cure for hysterics. And it starts off with a simple peppermint water. And then it has some other valerian and lavender in it and some other things. So we have, it's very, very common in these period recipes and medicinal books to have these different kind of essences of herbs and flowers in them, whatnot. This is the scary medicine book, but even that's got some.
I mean, a lot of the ones that I was specifically honing in on, you're like, there's this particular one doesn't have anything in it. That
right, this one won't kill you. You know?
Yeah, it's fine.
You kind of look hard for some of them, and this one, while many of them are for medicinal cases, there are also ones. This was how to make the face beautiful, white, smooth. So beauty waters for people. And hopefully, it doesn't have something like lead in it, which some of them sometimes it does. Beans, that's interesting. Wine, goat's milk.
So someone had a question, and they were wondering if people ate cicadas in the 17th century America. And I've never heard a reference to it. But in one of the books that I was looking at today, they had earthworms, and they were talking about, you're like, okay, now take your earthworms and like make sure that they're all clean and tidy, and now use them in this medicinal recipe.
Yeah, there's also recipes with hog lice, which are just like the little pill bugs, some other things like that. They're, strange little. I don't think they're actually be very efficacious, but it sounds good. It's sort of like when kids make up things, they just sort of
Right.
add
You just throw
everything
stuff in.
together.
You're like, no one would eat this if it didn't do something useful.
Right.
So it must do something super
Yeah,
useful.
exactly. Okay. It does seem like they're making it up. So here's a easy remedy for a recently bloodshot eye. We take rotten apple and as many tops of wormwood, sort of like a flour, but very astringent, being well beaten together, will make a mass the consistency of a catasalm. Warm it and put it in a thin and clean linen rag and let it lie on the patient all night. And then you wash it off with rose water. So rotten apples. I don't think we have any rotten apple stuff in our.
No. I don't think there's any apple stuff at all, rotten or otherwise.
So,
I feel like it'd be a nice, squishy consistency.
yeah. This one is a medicine for cough that starts off with turnips, boiling turnips. Again, we don't have any turnips in our stuff. There's clary though. Yeah. Yep.
Okay, I've got a super chat from Azula Akemi. What did folk wear to keep the rain off back then?
Yeah, when clothes are expensive and hats especially expensive and they can easily damaged by the rain, especially the hats, that you do see people wearing like cloaks and sometimes specific clothing that has oilcloth, basically painted clothing for those kinds of situations. There's even some references to oilcloth covers for hats. It's certainly something that you would have to certainly take a lot of care of. And our clothing today tends to be very, very color fast, and it gets wet and it's not really a big deal, but their clothing could easily be damaged by getting wet. So people probably a lot more careful about being out in the rain.
And you did get the very general sense that they just tried hard not to be out in the rain if they could.
At least if you have nice clothing on,
Yeah.
right? So some people, if you're working, if you're a farmer, it's like, oh, it's raining on you. Nah, my clothing will take that all day long. Maybe it'll be better. It'll actually be cleaner.
But your Sunday clothes, those you tried hard not
Exactly.
to. Okay, I've got a super chat from Allie Burden. No comment. Just
Thank you very much.
Thank you. And I've got a super chat from Seven Dust. Did colonists architecturally commingle with livestock for warmth, or were germs figured out?
Yeah, you're going to have, depending on the cultural situation there, I think you're definitely going to have some situations, especially in the lower class, where you're commingling with livestock, right? You're going to be in a house, and so, yeah, there's going to be livestock in your house. That may not be nearly as common in North America as it might be in some other specific cultures, but I'm sure that's happening in certain situations. And germs, I mean, hey, we're dealing with germs. I mean, whether you have livestock in your house or not.
And it obviously was something they weren't because as you became not lower class, that stopped, and you didn't. So it wasn't their favorite thing to do. But if you our chickens have been slowly winnowed down. And if your only choice to keep your chickens alive was to have them in the house with you, then, and that was what got you through the wintertime?
I would not want to have chickens in my house.
No. But you would if that's what was going to keep both of you alive.
Yeah, or you have a house that's...
How much warmth do you think a chicken could
Well,
give
the
you?
cows would be for warmth. The chickens, it would be just to protect the chickens. If you
Yes,
didn't
I was
have enough
thinking the
buildings.
chickens wouldn't give you anything.
No.
Cows would.
Other than eggs, they're giving you eggs.
Well, not that much in winter.
No, that's true. That's true. Okay, so this person, a super chat from Bill Goodnew, saying, has Townsend's ever offered for sale the grand clothing as depicted on Bridgeton? Would it be cost prohibitive? And the answer is, it would be cost prohibitive, and we have never offered anything particularly fancy.
Yeah, since the number of people who need the super fancy stuff and who can afford it is smaller, it tends to be very custom things, and we don't specialize in that high-end custom clothing. So.
And you look at it and you're like, oh, how beautiful, and you're like, it's made out of silk, it has gold, it has handmade lace trim on it, and it's just incredible. So, I always enjoy seeing it though.
Right.
The Metropolitan tends to have some really nice high-end stuff that I will run across when I'm doing research. It's always fun to see it as I'm going through them. Okay, so here's a super chat from Mainwarunda Kona. Can you do a video on 18th century Jewish traditions?
It might be interesting as a topic. It's harder to necessarily research, and I don't know. I'm guessing, Jewish tradition in North America or in Great Britain in the time period. It's not as easy to find that. You do see some particular recipes in the books that talk about, it's like, oh, this is, a Jewish dish or whatever. Not many, but a few. And generally that was, I don't have a good answer for where I would find the best information for that. So that would be something I have to do some library digging and see what kind of research has been done on it.
Mm-hmm. Okay, here's a super chat from Speed and Style Tony. I have seen using gunpowder to cauterize a wound in movies. Did they actually do it?
To cauterize them? In other words, to I don't know.
Like, why wouldn't you just heat up a knife and use the knife to cauterize?
And even the cauterization, they had different reasons for doing it, and whether that was a stopping blood flow or this is kind of sterilizing it. Again, that's particular specific medicinal reading. Different ideas are going to. Different authors, even in the time period, are going to differ as to why they would do that, and it would be an interesting study.
But
I have not.
You've never run across anyone using gunpowder.
Not gunpowder,
as mentioned.
No. That doesn't mean it isn't there.
Right.
There's so much to read.
There is.
I mean, you could.
And sometimes you'll know you've read something, and you'll read it again, thinking about a certain topic, and you'll see something you didn't see before.
Exactly.
So that's uncommon at all. Okay, so here's a question from Jim. Can you do one of these Friday live stream sessions from the cabin with the fireplace in the background and you preparing a meal or some such?
Well, that's a funny question. We were talking about doing another German kitchen live stream just soon.
Yeah,
so.
The German kitchen's more set up for it. And so that's probably where we do an
cabin really doesn't have the power.
The squirrels for the Time Vortex they don't like it there. They like the kitchen better. There's more food.
Yeah. There's plenty of squirrels in the kitchen, that's for sure.
But we might be able to do that. And if so, it's going to be great.
Yeah, it's funny because we were talking about it today.
We were. So. We were. Okay. We're at 5.
So if you're interested in any Apothecary things, make sure to check out the website. Lauren will drop another link in there. We've got a great video coming up on Sunday, and we've got some fun stuff. Ryan and I have been planning some of the next episodes coming out. We got one where we go back and kind of revisit something we did in the past, and then we've got some kind of in-depth kind of mini docs we're working on. So lots of fun stuff in the hopper in video land. And I'm headed off to go do some specific historic site shooting here in a minute. So it'll be a lot of fun. So thank you guys so much. Oh, wait, I have it somewhere. I got it. Do I have it? Do I have it? Do I have it? This week's Patreon and well, I almost forgot it.
Uh-oh.
I even had it here. New and renewing YouTube members. Dundas County Archives. David Collar. Thank you, David. Sean Bain. Halblingen, Phoebe Jones, Carson Hines, Jessica Gasparini, Mason Heppel, David Stokely, David Maxwell, Pedrem Samapur, Jelinette Andrews, and Dynamo. Those are YouTube folks. And then brand new Patreon, Mithras K, and Liz Woods. Thank you guys so much for your support. Thank you so much for the super chat support and all your great, kind support of us in every way possible. Thank you so much. I hope you have a wonderful weekend. Thanks for watching.